esoteric Freemasonry, among other things. And we have the traditions brought by Chevalier Ramsay, a Scottish thinker. And we also have this thing in France called Martinism. And Martinism goes back to Martinez de Pasquale, who was a Jewish mystic from the West Indies, actually, who became an initiatory Freemason. And he wrote an amazing book called The Reintegration of Spirits, which is a metaphysical treatise on why the world is the way it is. And it's because of the spirits that we are embodied and the spirits that are around us that are out of body were originally created by the Supreme God to all have our appropriate stations and to all be, you know, in a particular relationship. But we all jostled for position, we all battled, and we fell into chaos and disunion and conflict. And that's been going on ever since. There will come a time when we are reintegrated. So the notion of integration is crucial to French esoteric work. And I think this underlies some of the mystical groups' support for the European Union, which is about integration, the integration of Europe. That's a metaphysical position, which is that by working together, we are stronger. Like in America, you know, the states work together in unity as strength, right? But there's also traditions of Mary Magdalene coming, you know, to the south of France, and I'm very interested in those legends. Did she come? How old are those legends? If they're only legends, then why are they there? That's why we're having the second part of this conference down in that territory. We're going to go and meet at the place. And, you know, the Cathar Church was very influential in France and seemed to draw on these much more ancient Gnostic teachings, Zoroastrian, Manichaean, and so on. It had its own transmissions. Did that bring with it certain understandings of Mary Magdalene that ended up here in France? That's the kind of questions we need to ask. Also, the Knights Templars were very powerful in France, and not far from here there's a Templar preceptory. I went to where it was from, Champagne, to go on a pilgrimage to meet some of these, the shrines of these early Templars. And did the Templars receive any of the secrets of Mary Magdalene? Did they understand these Gnostic things? I think probably, yes. I think they did. And that's why they were called heretics by the formal outer royal papal structures who want to keep everything simple so they can keep promoting their wars, you see. If we simplify theology and everything's cut and dried and here's this and there's that, then we have to fight forever. If we break it back to its original complexity, we see that it's astoundingly beautiful, its symmetry of interconnectedness. And so many of the thoughts of Muhammad and so many of the thoughts of Jesus or Moses, they're all interconnected, or Enoch or Zoroaster. If you bring the true saints together, there can be no excuse for war, which is always oversimplification. And this is why metaphysically I oppose violence, because it's an oversimplification of complexity. Only love, it seems to me, is an appreciation of true complexity. When you truly love someone or something, you're saying, blimey, you're complicated. As anyone that's ever been in a deep relationship knows, you know. So there we are. I think the Frankish kingdoms of Outremer. I mean, I'd love to do some research on the Mary Magdalene churches in Outremer under the French when they were there. Did they dig around? You know, it's really interesting. I mean, people like Lawrence Gardner have, I don't know, they've sort of created pseudo-histories, and Uncle Tom Cobley are all descended from Jesus and Mary Magdalene, and he's, you know, the grandson of the last one. But I think it's fiction, mostly, but I think where there's fiction there's also truth, and a bit like Dan Brown, you know, so yes, it's fiction, but it tells a kind of truth, right? So, discuss. Then we have the question of the Druid background, because France and Western Europe, this is Druid territory for centuries, millennia, all the megaliths and menhirs and dolmens. Well, the Celts were really into their goddesses. The Celtic pantheon was goddesses and gods sharing power, sharing responsibility. the Tuatha De Danann and the children of Dana, the goddess, which gave her name to the Danube. The Celts were in the first tribal cultures that emerged out of Paleolithic times and brought the Neolithic in. Colin Renfrew, Professor of Archaeology at Cambridge, has worked on the origin of the Celts. So if you're interested in the Druid take, you read my book on Druidry and transpersonal history. It's much more ancient than people realise. And yes, I think that's another reason why they embraced Christianity, because they appreciated the beauty of the story, and why not just Mary Magdalene, but also the Virgin Mary, the mother, was so important. Because in the Celtic tradition, you have the mother, the maiden, and the crone. They're all important, the three phases of womanhood. And Mary Magdalene's the maiden, Virgin Mary's the mother. The crone, well, discuss. Unfortunately became the witch and then was persecuted, which is completely ridiculous and tragic, because that's the time of spiritual power for womanhood, is the crone's period. What about PhD students? Well, I'm interested in this. I think we ought to be in touch and make links. There are a few people doing PhDs on Mary Magdalene. And we should encourage, I'm thinking the association should launch a kind of newsletter once a year for people to interlink. It could have a website or something. What about Sophia? Sophia is wisdom. Christ was seen as a Sophianic teacher. Mary Magdalene becomes that, Sophia embodied. And I don't think he would have had a deep relationship with her if she hadn't got wisdom. So what is wisdom? Well, it's Chokhmah in Hebrew. And wisdom in all different languages is important, something I've looked at. Interestingly, I discovered that Athena, the goddess of wisdom, was secretly a lover of Prometheus. They don't tell you this in the myth books. She's supposed to be the virgin, but she actually has an affair with Prometheus. And he's the one that brings fire. And Christ as Promethean firebringer it's like the wisdom was too hot to handle. So what do? Well, we kill him. And that resistance to wisdom I call Sophiophobia. It's a medical condition. Human beings can only take a bit. And so, there's more stuff to look at with René Girard's theories in France. But I think wisdom needs to be embraced back into our society. If we said the most important human right is knowledge and enlightenment, our social institutions and political institutions would change. Coming up to the end, there's a few other points. Islam doesn't really mention Mary Magdalene, which I find interesting. And part of the problem, the context in which Muhammad received his revelations and the cultural media had not got the Mary Magdalene story. And yet, Islam loves women, and Muhammad loved women so much he kept marrying them. He particularly loved Khadija, who was his first, consort. And great Sufis like Ibn Arabi have emphasised the feminine aspect of the divinity. So there's room there. I think somebody should translate the Gospel of Mary Magdalene and Magdalene studies into Arabic and have that conversation with them. Because the Arabic culture, the Quran has many Aramaic loanwords. Even the word khatam, which is the seal of the prophets, is an Aramaic loanword. Bruce can explain this later. So a lot of the key theological terms in the Quran actually came from Aramaic, from Syriac sources, which were Gnostic Christian, probably. Muhammad was very inspired by Gnostic Christianity, which is why he has the story that Jesus never died on the cross. He vanished. He didn't suffer. That was a Gnostic idea. And there are many other things in the Quran. So when we can re-understand that actually Islam is an offshoot, actually, of Gnostic Judeo-Christianity, reclaim it back into that context, and then the wars can stop, and we can make a Gnostic peace. Right. And that's the role of scholars, is to make that possible so that everybody can get it. Because it's got to be operative not just for the highest intellectuals at Oxford, but also for the masses in downtown Beirut or Cairo or East End of London. I think it can be packaged in that way. That's why I went and taught in schools for 10 years and coped with with having to translate all this into street language. It can be done. Okay, so I'm going to stop because I've come up to my end. I'm going to finish off down south, so if you want the second part of my talk, you have to come with me to the Pyrenees Mountains. But I want to just summarise my conclusion here, for those that won't be with me in the south of France. I know Bruce isn't going to be there, are you, on this occasion, tragically, unless you come down on the train.
I have to head north.
Okay. So anyway, my conclusion, the rediscovery of the lost Mary Magdalene feminine aspect of the church can help restore common sense into interfaith dialogue and can help us challenge the diabolic wars going on, which are all between extreme polarized traditions. Yeah? It's interesting, the word devil, diabolos, means something thrown across in a double way. It's doubleness, and to overcome that is about finding what Hegel called the mediatory position of synthesis between rival polarities. So that's why I trained as a mediator and run the only interfaith mediation service in the world. It's very frustrating because, all these religious wars, there's no reason for them. And Mary Magdalene can help bring that common sense in. This is why I created the Interfaith Peace Treaty. And that's a 45-paragraph treaty. I'd love you all to read it and sign it, put your illustrious names to it, and take it and share it with other scholars and people, because it's the first time ever that anyone said, let's the religions of the world make a peace treaty. It came to me because how do wars end? They end with the peace treaty. How did World War I end? They ended with a peace treaty, where the protagonists come down, they write a document, and they sign it, and that's the end of the war. That's the official ending.
Then they break it, and then there's another war.
Well, this is the problem of politicians, but religious people, hopefully, being more elevated, would put their signatures to it and then stick by it. So all they're saying is, I as a Muslim, the Imam, chief Imam of Jerusalem, I will not let my people go and stab Jews anymore or throw rockets at them. And I as a chief rabbi in Jerusalem won't let my people attack, Arabs, etc. So anyway, it's an interfaith peace treaty, and I think Mary Magdalene would love it. And there is a text there. If you read the text carefully, it summarises what I'm saying about getting away from over-literal readings of texts. We have to get to a much more sophisticated reading of these sacred texts. Another thing the Mary Magdalene teachings can do is to clean up our sexuality as a planet. As I'm speaking, there are crimes of passion, sexual abuse, rape going on. They're ridiculous. Sex is something absolutely sacred. We should revere it and, understand it. And it's got nothing to do with violence. So we have to, I'm with the Jains on that. Ahimsa is like absolute. I'm not a Jain monk, but I'm there with them in spirit. And we have to clean up our act. That's the idea of the wisdom affair. And I think Mary Magdalene and Jesus can help that. The other thing this tradition can help is a bridge between exoteric and esoteric forms of Christianity. I'm not saying, like the Protestant reformers made a mistake, I think, when they threw out a lot of the Catholic teachings, a lot of the art, they failed to understand. Protestant zealots, like Luther and Calvin and so on, didn't get the sophistication that's in the deep church. And a true reformer preserves, but explains. So in the Catholic and the Orthodox and the ancient churches, we have all these magical, mystical things which can be understood from within. So I think this is the reconciliation of esoteric and exoteric forms of Christianity. And also between spirituality and science, because I'm a great lover of science. And I want, what I'm saying to be understood as a scientific proposition as well. Peace to me has to be a scientific proposition, or it's not going to work. I have many friends among the scientific community who just about will listen to me because I can speak the scientific language. And I think that what these ancients were doing was proto-science. I think, above all, Mary Magdalene can be a clarion call for refinding peace on earth, Why? Because she straddles the boundaries. She was both Jewish and Christian. She wanted peace between these warring factions, whether you call them Jews or later Muslims or Christians, but also pagans, the Hermetics and the Zoroastrians. They all have their wisdom to bring. What we need now is a peace between them all. And I think that's the work. Islam and Judaism can both benefit by learning about Mary Magdalene, I think. And I think more needs to be done. Maybe the Mary Magdalene Studies Association could organise a conference in Mecca on Mary Magdalene and Islam. Now, wouldn't that be fun? Or Medina, perhaps, we might get away with. Why not? Let the dialogue begin. It's better than terrorism and bombing. What's the theory holding all this together? Well, I think identity theory is crucial here. And the fundamental flaw of violence and warfare and interreligious conflict that I've experienced is this notion of mono-identity. I'm an X, you're a Y, therefore we're going to fight. I want to bring in plural identity, which is I'm an X, I'm also a Y, I'm a Z, I'm a T, I'm an S, depending on my mood, I could be an M, and so can you. We all are the full alphabet. We have access to the full panoply of the Kabbalah runes, as Zosimus said. We're all made up of the elements that comprise the entire universe. Each one of us has all the zinc and whatever. So why do we have to dumb ourselves down and say, I'm only an X, and you're only a Y, and therefore I'm going to attack you? No, plural identity theory, we're all everything. And this has been pioneered by James Hillman in his interpretation of Jung. David Miller, who was a great religious studies expert, basing his work on Hillman and Jung, he wrote a book called The New Polytheism, which is the old Greeks were not that stupid when they said there's a plurality of deities, because God is so incredibly generous that he comes in different forms, like Hermes or Zeus or Aphrodite or whatever. You know, and those are aspects of the collective unconscious that manifest through all of us. I think Christ could do the whole panoply. That's what the really great teachers can do. They can manifest all of them at the appropriate time. So I think identity theory is going to be important for this healing work. And that's why Christ was always saying, who do you think I am? It was a trick question. And only Thomas answered properly. We don't know. Mary Magdalene was probably, she was winking at Thomas at the time as he was saying, I can't say what you are, Master. And Thomas said, and Jesus said, that's right, that's the correct answer. Because we are all everything. That's the answer to that question. And then finally, peace comes from listening to all these conversations. We need to make a map of peace. What do we want the world to look like? I'm working on a global peace plan at the moment. But it won't, we want the space to go on asking the questions. There's no closure to this conversation. If we're having this conference next year in Jerusalem and the reincarnation of Mary Magdalene walks in the room, the conversation continues. It's not like there's an end to it, because the end is mutual enlightenment in the world of peace. And that is the task that we have ahead of us. It's the Thomas right to go on asking questions, even in difficult circumstances, which was Socratic tradition as well. So that's why it's an academic project in the deepest sense of the word. And any attempts to close or silence or stop conversation is contrary to peace. And that has implications for political movements, for religious movements, for intellectual movements. And even in academia, nowadays, there's lots of closure going on. I'm saying open it. Ask the deep, profound questions, and that way we get peace. Right, okay, I'm going to stop there. That's my little contribution to get us